Do something right. So welcome to a brave new world, back to where we had been for many years. For the first 4 or 5 years, we were in the room next door, the founder's room, and we were just packed in there. And then they built the sanctuary over there, and we were able to take over this space and have some more room to spread out. We've had over 100 people in this room for a couple of talks about climate change and different things. And so it's nice to get back to this place. I feel comfortable in here. We feel that we're coming out from all the restrictions and red flags from the pandemic that's hopefully better understood and maybe less dangerous than it was 3.5 years ago now. We kind of cautiously poke our noses out up into the air and taste the breeze. It feels good. It's good to be together again. Quite a bit has happened. Some of you were faithful participants in Science Sunday through the whole 3.5 years of the COVID experience, and some had trouble participating in almost anything, and it's all okay. It's understood. A lot has happened. A lot has changed. We're back in the Learning Center at a new time and with a whole lot of new gadgets and devices to upgrade the adult enrichment experience. I like to call it that. Sometimes you'll see people calling it the adult religious education here, and I don't really buy that word as much as adult enrichment. Diane has a beautiful t-shirt there and talking about the differences. Philosophy is being in a dark room and looking for a cat, right? And the next thing says metaphysics is being in the dark room and looking for a cat. What, with a flashlight? That. Oh, metaphysics is like being in a dark room and looking for a black cat that isn't there. Theology is like being in a dark room and looking for a black cat that isn't there and shouting, "I found it!" And science is like being in a dark room and looking for a black cat using a flashlight. So.
When was the last time you saw a cat using a flashlight?
Yeah, you can misread almost anything if you want to. And we do often. So, starting next week, there are going to be 2 services at the DUC. I have to do a little bit of kind of just setting the stage of what's going to happen in here. The services are at 9 o'clock and 11:30. So from 9 to 10 is the first service, and then at 10:15 we'll be meeting here for Science Sundays on the first and third Sundays of the month. So it's going to be after this one, we're going to be starting at 10:15. So the time between those 2 services is planned for youth religious education, informal coffee hour, and also this adult enrichment. Of the adult enrichment time, because there's generally 4 weeks in the month of Sundays, then 2 of them, first and third Sundays, like we've had going for many, many years, will be Science Sunday. So first and third Sundays at 10:15, all right? So it's, what's that? Here, in this room, okay? So we aren't competing with any other service. We aren't competing with other things except maybe people that are teaching in the youth religious education won't be able to come, and that's happened before as well too. But for the most part, it should be free. Will be the only formal thing happening, and please come and participate. To give a 15-minute window after the first service to get organized and in place, Science Sunday and all adult enrichment activities will start at 10:15 and will end at 11:15. And that gives another 15 minutes for us to maybe chat a little bit and discuss and everything. We can hang around and talk later, but at that time, people that are going to go to the second service may want to be moving out to get into that area. The goal is to add more adult enrichment activities later. The church has decided not to do any now. We're the guinea pigs, as always, the scientific guinea pigs, to test things out, to make sure it all works. They're not trying to force all the other mid-activities in between the 2 services to have something for adults in it, but Science Sunday will be here fulfilling all your adult enrichment needs twice a month. And so that's exciting to me. And as we get settled, I think they're going to start adding on. I think that there would be some really nice things about history, right? We could have a adult enrichment thing about history or civics or a whole variety of different areas, social action. You know, all those times are open, and if you have interest or availability as we see how it's going, you know, bring it up with members of the church, leaders in the church, and they'll organize it from there. So I think the only limit really is what we choose to do as a group. To me, I think this is really good. I'm really happy about it. This hour is our time as a community to do the things that enliven us, that nurture us, that define us, actually. So much more may develop that we decide as we grow that we can't spend half of this precious time talking only about science. Who knows? Sad as that is, or would be, I'd be okay with that if we have other things that are as enlivening and fun and challenging as this. So, I think this is a real opportunity to become an exceptionally powerful force in the growth and success of this community. But what really happens, what really makes me feel great about it is your presence, your being here, and us communicating and interacting. That's really, really, that's what's going to make this gathering bloom. I would say it's been a tough 3.5 years to be leading Science Sundays, and we've had people coming in and showing up just to give us support. For about 2 of those years, we were just talking to a camera on the back wall, and we felt like it was important to do. We felt like this community needed to be supported, Scott and I, and the AV team with Justin and his whole AV team came and supported us, and they gave us the space in the room, and we zoomed it out to people. So I'm glad we did it, and I'm really glad it's over. So that's my real plea, is that we get together back as a community. The times we've had talking and discussing about things, and the challenge of that. I want to talk a little bit more about that before we get into today's topic. This is important to me, maybe, hopefully as much to you. So, Reverend Mandy is very excited about what happens here. The church has expended a good amount of money to upgrade the projector and projection system, and I think this space is really awesome. So please, if you're home right now and you find ways to, come and participate. We'll still broadcast to YouTube, but let me say, the importance of this Science Sunday lies much more in the fact that we get together and make community than in the science content that Scott and I, or whoever, Jim will be presenting at times too, that we present. And I'd like to say why. If you're really into science, that's great. So am I. Scott Thompson is a really knowledgeable guy and can communicate difficult topics really clearly. But, I mean, we both have full-time jobs, and we don't spend as much time diving deeply into every possible avenue that science can take, that science travels in. You know, if you really want to learn science, you should be looking at videos, YouTube videos. You should be listening to people like Richard Dawkins, Brian Greene, David Attenborough, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I could name, you know, dozens of others. You should click onto some of those YouTubes and watch them, and you'll learn more. It's much more cohesively presented. They've got great camera people, you know, and sound people and so on. You know, they have the degrees, the time, the financial backing, and so much more that allows a more in-depth, accurate, interesting, and beautiful presentation of the topics of astrophysics, biology, chemistry, human development, diseases, climatology, and so forth. Watch a bunch of videos, subscribe to scientific periodicals, and expand your mind. We can't compete, really, and that's not what we're trying to do. Our budget is our limited time and the portions of our resources we put into scientific explorations. What we've developed here and have come close to losing, really, in the past 3 years is a community. You here and you at home who come to share, discuss, wonder, question, then question a little bit more deeply, and maybe be contentious or skeptical or whatever. That's what is here. And then at the end of that, maybe you say, wow, or awesome, or cool. You know, after Scott and I present some scenario that did the same thing to us as we were presenting and ready to talk about it. And we're here to see the looks of awe and wonder on your faces as you hear some of the things we talk about too. And that's what's human about this here, and it's humanistic. It's not just gaining knowledge. It's being a group that hears what each other has to think about things and sees that community that develops from that. The times we've had going and meeting and looking at Saturn and the moon and so on through telescopes at times. And we've had parties in the Creeves Hall about Pluto, being relegated to a dwarf planet, and we thought it needed a party, and so on. So all those things that make us a community is pretty important to, I think, all of us. So it's humanistic, and please come to Science Sundays on the first and third Sundays of each month. It'll do us all a world of good. 10:15 to 11:15 right here in this room. To those of you who would like to be kept up, I'm going to pass out at the end. Make sure you give me your email address. I put out just like 2 or 3 emails a month just telling you what's coming up, so that kind of a reminder to you. If you're interested and haven't been getting those emails, just give me your email today, and I'll make sure that you're on the list too. Like I say, I don't send out many. You're not going to get slammed with things. So I wanted to start out too talking about timelines and times in history to kind of set the stage for all this. I really liked timelines when I was in school. If we ever had a project, always sign me up for making the timelines. I like that kind of stuff. I've shared this before, but I thought it's a good thing to do as we begin our talk today. If you think of the width of this room as the time from the Big Bang started until now, this is a representation in this distance, okay? The Big Bang was 13 billion years ago, roughly. The universe expanded and diversified until about 4.5 billion years ago, our solar system created, and the Earth, and so on. 4.5 billion years ago. If you're thinking about the size of this room from the Big Bang, if you're looking at it that way, you'd probably think that's time zero, and that's present time over at that wall. We're talking about 4.5 billion years ago is just a little bit longer than the span of my fingertip to fingertip. 4.5 billion years would be another this much onto the end of that. So that means if I stand here and allow for that 500 million years, right here is the beginning of the solar system. Okay? It's a nice way to kind of think about it, and it's a really great way to talk about it with kids too. All right? Life on Earth happened, if I'm about this far away, life on Earth happened at this point, right here. And for the 4 billion years that life's been on the planet, it's been all that time, 3 billion of those, so 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion of those years, the most complex feature on the Earth has been bacteria. One-celled organisms, bacteria. So again, beginning of the universe, this is a point anything more complex than one-celled organisms came on the Earth. It's just a nice picture, way to think about it. So if you imagine me still standing over there, but I want to get to the microphone because Justin's going nuts back there. We have this time from here, the beginning of multi-celled organisms, something going along to here, in all this time of the life of the universe. You think of the efforts that it would take if there's some deterministic creature that decided to make humans. They'd have to make it way over there and have it be nothing, 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 or very complex, interesting things, and Scott will talk about those very often. But all the way up to this point where we have anything alive more than a single-celled creature, okay? The first real complex creatures were in the Cambrian Time, which is about 500 million years ago, 500 million years ago. Those are things like Ediacaris and notochords, the first backboned creature, or creature not really with a backbone, but with a branch of a spinal column to it. Can't even call it a spinal column. It's a line of nervous system that went through the length of its body. Dinosaurs, somewhere around here. Okay, So we think of dinosaurs as some ancient creatures, and ancient is only from here to the time we're in now, right? Somewhere around in this area, we started getting amphibians, things like that, reptiles coming on land. The first mammals were about in this point here. First primates would be about a cutting of a fingernail. The first real hominids and humans would be just a shaving of a fingernail, a couple of shavings of a fingernail. So when you think of that time and all of history, it's an interesting way to think about it. And I wanted to kind of get that in mind when we think about this human Anthropocene time, also called Anthropocene. So I just thought it was a good way to start talking about that a little bit. All of human history, all of human recorded history would be removed by swiping from a fingernail file. So it's, to me, that's a pretty amazing start. So we currently are in what is called by scientists the Holocene period. Holocene is from the Latin and it means wholly new. And at the time when they started naming eras of time, it looked like this was wholly new things were going on in here. There weren't enormous volcanic activity. Everything was kind of new and a new way of looking at things. And it was only about 12,000 years ago that the Holocene started. And it was shown that that was a change in which creatures were, the continents were in fairly common the areas that we recognize they are, and things hadn't changed that much. And so it was considered to be an important time for mammals, and that was the term, the Holocene. It started 12,000 years ago. It's identified with a period of warming after the last glacial maximum. It corresponds with the rapid proliferation, growth, and the many impacts, really, of the human species on Earth. I had my clicker. Justin, can you advance it? I don't know where I put my clicker.
Mike, don't we usually just think of the Holocene as the end of the last ice age? And that's always a big question. Why haven't we had another ice age since then?
Yeah. Well, and it doesn't take a lot of change, and we've talked about that in other Science Sundays, that constant temperature change. But yeah, the Holocene is an ending of all the times that had been ice age times and so on, and now we're in it's only 12,000 years old. When you look at some of these other periods in here, some of these are 2,000 times longer than that. But the Holocene includes all of written history, technology, development of many major civilizations, and overall transition towards urban living, too. The Holocene itself has been split by the International Union of Geological Sciences. No one did where I put that clicker. I'll just have to keep calling you out, Justin. I lost him a clicker loser. So it's been called by the International Union of Geological Sciences into 3 distinct ages based on climate changes. The first, Greenlandian, and so you can see the Holocene right up here in the top corner, and all the different ages. And they have times ago, millions of years ago. And if you see the Holocene is 0.0117 of a million years ago. A very small amount of time. So we can change it, click it. The Greenlandian, which was 11,700 years ago, the beginning of the Holocene, to 8,200 years ago. The North Grippian is the next one, 8,200 years ago. We can change. And that's known for its cooling, actually, due to disruptions in ocean currents following the major meltings of many glaciers. So this is kind of the Great Ocean Conveyor Belt, and this was severely disrupted partway through the Holocene. You can see the warm water coming past Australia and around the bottom of Africa, coming up and warming up Europe, and then cooling off up around Greenland and coming down along the Atlantic coast down to South Africa and swirling back around again. So that's the standard current, and that's been disrupted during the Cambrian time. So you can see a lot more cooling there.
So it's exactly backwards of what it is today.
Yeah. Yeah, usually there's the ocean current that comes up along North America and comes up that way and then cools off in Greenland and comes down, right? And finally is the Megalayan age. And that was characterized by a real severe drought that actually was disrupting the end of the prior age and changing everything because of that disruption of the current and things like that, and it caused some severe restrictions in human activity, and then we worked our way through it from there. The extinction of many of the large animals worldwide, such as saber-toothed tigers, mammoths, ground sloths, giant cave bears, giant beavers, occurred at the beginning of the Holocene and the end of the Pleistocene. Okay. So that was some large changes that occurred too that are marked by the beginning of the Holocene period. Then you think, like, why would an epoch like that come to an end? You know, what would cause an epoch come to an end, especially after only 12,000 years? The Upper Devonian epoch lasted 24 million years. That's about when fishes were around, and Neil Shubin found the first kind of fish that was somewhat fish, somewhat had limbs growing, and we talked about one bone, two bones, lots of bones, and developing of arms and limbs in fish were in the Upper Devonian time, 435 million years ago. But that lasted 24 million years ago, or 24 million years as a comparison. That's 2,000 times longer than this short Holocene period that we've had. So you can go on. And again. So what would happen that's causing scientists to discuss seriously whether we are entering into a markedly different epoch after only 12,000 years? And the answer is humans. Humans are creating systemic change in the processes that guide the patterns of climate, but they're also living ecosystems around the earth are changing, from the depths of the ocean to the tops of the mountains, and they're changing significantly. When you think of a picture like that, and you think of humans, you think of them evolving and reproducing almost like primates would, right? You know, a parent has a couple of offspring and so on, and it goes on from there. But the biologist E.O. Wilson says, the pattern of human population growth in the 20th century was more bacterial than primate. It's just been a phenomenal increase in the amount of growth, and usually what you attribute to, like, bacteria is reproducing and reproducing and reproducing and reproducing. The human biomass is now 100 times greater. The biomass, if you talk about the biomass that makes up humans, it's 100 times greater than that of any other large animal species that has ever existed on the earth. We've got more biomass accumulated in human beings by a factor of 100 times than any other large animal on earth. But here's a question for you. Only one time in Earth's history has one species radically altered the entire natural world. Can you think of a time in Earth's history that one species had a radical change in the makeup of our world as it has happened with us?
When the bacteria started producing oxygen.
Exactly, yeah. The blue-green algae actually were feeding on the bacteria that you're talking about, and the blue-green algae created oxygen, which was to them excrement, right? It was, it was flatulence, basically. And so billions of years ago, before creatures like sharks or ants or even flowering plants existed, when the atmosphere was a poisonous brew and we would have needed gas masks, spongy colonies of one-celled blue-green algae blanketed the shallow seas. You can still see the remnants of them in Australia. They're just like hardened pockets of these fossilized blue-green algae that they almost look like mushrooms, that they've blossomed on the top of the water, and then they have a little column stalk beneath them. They're all single-celled bacteria, or single-celled algae that have grown together, colonized together. So they blanketed the shallow seas. They dined on water and sunlight and pumped torrents of oxygen, it's their version of flatulence, into the atmosphere. It's a humbling thought, but one life form's excrement is another's special tonic. The development of life on Earth owes a great deal to the ages long ago's quiet presence of blue-green algae. It's really the only other time in the history of life on Earth that one species had such an impact on the planet. And this is the second time, humans. Humans' presence on Earth has followed a different path than blue-green algae, though. The author Diane Ackerman describes it like this. There's an interesting passage I wanted to read from her book called The Human Age. She's got a orangutan here playing with a laptop computer and animals, and it's a very good book. She's more known for the beekeeper's daughter. Is that what it is, I think? The zookeeper's daughter. And so she's a very good science writer. But she says, humans have always been hopped up, restless busybodies. During the past 11,700 years, a mere blink of time since the glaciers retreated at the end of the last ice age, we invented the pearls of agriculture, writing, and science. We traveled in all directions, followed the long hands of rivers, crossed snow kingdoms, scaled dizzying clefts and gorges, trekked to remote islands in the poles, plunged to ocean's depths, haunted by fish lit like luminarias and jellies with golden eyes. Under a worship of stars, we trimmed fires and strung lanterns all across the darkness. We framed Oz-like cities, voyaged off our home planet, and golfed on the moon. We dreamt up a wizardry of industrial and medical marvels. We may not have shuffled the continents, but we've erased and redrawn their outlines with cities, agriculture, and climate change. We've blocked and rerouted rivers, depositing thick sediments of new land. We've leveled forests, scraped and paved the earth. We've subdued 75% of the land surface, preserving some pockets as wilderness, denaturing vast tracts for our businesses and homes, and homogenizing a third of the world's ice-free land through farming. We've lopped off the tops of mountains to dig craters and quarries for mining. It's as if aliens appeared with mega mallets and laser chisels and started resculpting every continent to better suit them. We've turned the landscape into another form of architecture. We've made the planet our sandbox. When it comes to Earth's life forms, we've been especially busy. We and our domestic animals now make up 90% of all the mammal biomass on Earth. All the mammal biomass on Earth, 90% is we and our domestic animals. In the year 1000, we and our animals were only 2%. As for wild species, we've redistributed plants and animals to different parts of the world, daring them to evolve new habits, revise their bodies, or go extinct. They've done all three in the process. We're deciding what species will ultimately share the planet with us. Even the clouds show our handiwork. Some are wind-smeared contrails left by globetrotters and airplanes. Others darken and spill as a result of factory grit loosed into the air. We've banded the crows. We've hybridized the trees. We've trussed the cliffs. We've dammed the rivers. We would supervise the sun if we could. we already harness its rays to power our whims, a fear the gods of ancient mythology would envy. The gods of ancient mythology would envy. Like supreme beings, we now are present everywhere and in everything. We've colonized or left our fingerprints on every inch of the planet, from the ocean sediment to the exosphere, the outermost fringe of atmosphere where molecules escape into space, junk careens, and satellites orbit. Nearly all of the wonders we identify with modern life emerged in just the past 2 centuries. And over the past couple of decades, like a giant boulder racing ahead of a landslide, the human adventure has accelerated at an especially mind-bending pace. There's more that's just as good in here, I think. She ends that chapter saying, if we could travel back to, say, the Iron Age, few of us would go without packing certain essentials. Matches you'd want if you'd go back to the Iron Age, antibiotics, corrective lenses, a compass, knives, shoes, you'd want shoes back there, vitamins. Think of the things we'd want to bring back. Pencil and paper. A toothbrush would be pretty nice to have. Fish hooks, metal pot, a flashlight with solar batteries would be pretty helpful, and an array of other inventions that make life safer. We wouldn't travel light if we moved back in time. So I thought that's a really interesting way to express some of the things that we've done. The immense ways that we've changed the world. Just phenomenal. So if this is a new epoch on Earth, one influenced greatly by human interventions, how is it going? Are there positive aspects? Sometimes I think we look at this and we think about so much of the challenge we're bringing to the Earth, and people say we're killing our planet and so on. Actually, I think the planet's going to be pretty fine with or without us, no matter what happens. It'll shake us off like some bad fleas, and it'll go on and do its thing. It's faced a lot through its time. So it's not, to me, so much a question of are we going to kill off the Earth, and maybe we should not look at it that way, but we should maybe look at what is changing and how is it changing and what can we do about that. How can we still survive on this planet, right, as with what we do to it? So if you think about it, in my mind, it's as important to think of the positive aspects, which I think are good to discuss and talk about a bit, and not just look at the way we're killing the planet. Okay. Anyone have any other suggestions of things that are good aspects of the changing of the epoch now to a human epoch? What's that? Medicines of all kinds. Medicines, the ability to fight diseases, right? People suffered with.
I would have died in 1954. I had mononucleosis.
Right. So people with diseases that have been put to the side, right? Smallpox, polio, mononucleosis has been, at least has ways to fight and address it, right? And that's really, some of these things are from the 1940s, right? The development of penicillin and some of the antibacterial agents. Jim?
Yeah, just, after reading Steven Pinker's new book, there was a whole list of all the things in terms of lifespan, reduction of poverty, increased democracy, and very impressive increase. Yes, if you've seen if you've seen Steven Pinker's new book on advances recently, it's very impressive to think of it that way, to kind of get out of the negative feeling. But we're all sitting here worried about global warming as reversing too many of those things. And what do you think of global warming?
Yeah. Well, we'll get into some of that too. Did you have a thing you wanted to add?
Think of life without electricity.
Life without electricity, right, yeah. Thank you. Imagine life without electricity, right? We're seeing things here. Right there. Diane.
I think a recent development in like the past 20 years that gives a lot of people hope is our understanding of like genetics and decoding how we can use genetics to recreate like DNA structures that might have gone extinct by our own doing. So understanding that, we might be able to reverse all of the damage we've done.
Right, yeah, yeah.
Seems like a kind of obvious one, but what about writing?
Writing,
You know, without writing, we wouldn't have anything else.
passing on knowledge. We can pass on knowledge to others, right? The things that we, through either photographs or, the use of electricity to make photographs, or writing, the things that have passed on from John Locke to, all throughout the last few hundred years of that. Yeah, definitely. And it's an amazing contribution when you think of these creatures, when you think about bacteria just surviving for 3 billion years on Earth, and then in this amount of time and in the shaving of a fingernail, what humanity has developed and achieved, right? Yeah, and it can bring you to some pretty amazing places. We have the capacity to do quite a bit to save the planet, and we just have to find out ways to do it and so on. In back?
Healthy eating.
I'm sorry.
Healthy eating.
Healthy eating, right? I mean, just the capacity to feed 7 billion people, or most of them at least, on the planet is amazing.
And of
and
course,
some of
the
that,
opposite is fast foods and everything else. They didn't have them in the 12th century. Although, if we look back at Rome, we find that they did have easy restaurants. They had the equivalent of McDonald's. That is, there was a shop on every corner, and you walked up and you got your food and you continued on.
wow.
So this is new.
We're following Rome's path in many ways,
yeah.
huh? So I think there are a lot of positive things, and it's important to realize them and discuss them, that those are aspects of development and improvement and challenge, and challenges taken and challenges overcome, challenges bested. So as they look at we're trying to say here's a new age, and there's debate as to whether there is or not, and scientists at their best are looking at these things and saying, well, we shouldn't just make an age because we're important or something like that. They should really find something that defines what is there and how do you find that about it. Other ages have been demarked, and if scientists can find places on the planet that demonstrate those changes so significantly, a change from a water environment to another environment, some of the changes that have happened in the earth, it can, they mark it and they put a golden spike. They call it a golden spike, and they drive it into places that are demonstrative of that change. So in, I think it's Fabrio, Italy, they have a place where there's a little layer, and this is actually worldwide, but they determined a place that really demonstrates it well. This is an iridium deposition. It's only about 1/4 of an inch thick, but iridium is an element that's not found generally on Earth, and when it is, it's pretty well dispersed. So why would there be a layer of iridium deposition in back?
Is it because of when the meteorite hit the planet?
Exactly. When the meteorite hit the planet in Yucatan, all right, this is kind of one of the best known ones. It was laid down at the end of the Cretaceous period, 66 million years ago. 66 million. This is 500 million, 250. What died off 66 million years ago with the
Land dinosaurs.
The dinosaurs, right? Many of the dinosaurs, the ones that didn't stay as birds. Right? So 66 million years ago, this is a mass extinction event. An asteroid approximately 7 miles in diameter struck the Earth in the waters near the Yucatan Peninsula. The ensuing explosion not only wiped out large swaths of the living plants and animals of the time, it also left as a settled layer of this iridium, an element often associated with extraterrestrial objects. It's all around the globe. It's quite literally fallout. A group called the International Commission of Stratigraphy determined the timing and causes of such events and nominates areas that clearly demonstrate the transition from one area or period, from one era or period to another. So this iridium layer, that white band, that grayish band right there, and anything below it is from the time when the dinosaurs were around. You would find certain fossils in there, and you would find different fossils and different things there. It's very, very definite change in time period. Okay. Where on the globe would you think, if we are going into a new time period, and what would we be looking for to show what's on the globe? What would you nominate as a representative site to show future scientists what caused the human age? Okay. All right, places where you see plastic all over the world. Other thoughts? Jim? Farmland, the presence of demonstrative acres of farmland there. Justin? Oh, is it working? In back? Architecture, you'd see buildings, sites, and so on. Landfills could be pretty representative. You can imagine future archaeologists digging through our landfills, right?
Antarctica.
Big boots. Antarctica?
Lack of ice.
Lack of ice? Okay. It's been a tropic at times in its past, though, too, right? So a whole variety of different things. Here's ancient structures in the Middle East. Some of these are maybe things similar to what you've said, too. Cave paintings might be interesting demonstration of it. Maybe our remnants of our superhighway system. I'm just now flashing back to Charlton Heston on the beach with the Statue of Liberty coming through and Planet of the Apes. Easter Island, the stone figures on Easter Island might be picked by these people. Or Chichen Itza.
I just read something about, they've found what cesium and strontium, all this stuff over the planet from when we were testing nuclear weapons.
Yeah, all the different remnants of our modern age, cesium, strontium, all the different plutoniums, the different plastics, kind of a similar, almost human fallout, right, of things.
There was an interesting,
There's
an interesting program many years ago now that someone tried to foist off a batch of wine as being ancient, except they analyzed it and found cerium in it, which of course was the results of the nuclear weapons, and therefore had to be post-1945.
Okay. Coral reefs off Australia might be demonstrative of it. And I had Antarctic ice, like was being talked about by Joanne. How about a lake in Canada? Here's the current winner. This one was chosen, and it's being represented and being discussed now. It's gone up through a few levels of decision making, and this lake in Canada is being chosen as the possible golden spike, the demonstrative area that shows the Holocene period coming to an end and the Anthropocene period starting. Kind of surprising, right? It's, next slide. It's up in this area. It's in a kind of a suburb of Toronto. And it's a very small lake. And that's been portrayed as the choice, as the winner. It's called Crawford Lake. It's a small lake near Toronto. It's incredibly deep for its size. I think it's 80 meters deep, and has a very stable structure at its depth, very stable underground structure. This allows for very, very regular and stable sedimentation that can be collected and then read like tree rings almost. From a small raft, scientists drill down through 80 feet of water to stable sediments that can be dated back over 1,000 years. I think the next slide shows some of that. They're bringing a sediment slice back off the boat from the raft. And then the next one starts showing them cutting away at this sediment slice to find out what they can see inside it. So if there's this place near Toronto that's just been accumulating for 1,000 years, the sediments that come each year, what do you think are they finding in these sediments that help them see the difference in the ages that come of the Earth?
Dirt.
And back? Pollution. Increased CO2, possibly? Okay.
And methane.
Starting in 1950, they're seeing as they go through this, and they can go back way further, back to times, they've gone back, and this isn't as germane to our topic, but they found times when corn pollen was very high in this, back in the 1400s maybe, when Native Americans started doing more agricultural things in the area. They found a preponderance of more domesticated pollen in there compared to wild pollen. So they could see that, but that had less to do with what we're talking about. But starting in 1950, dramatic increase of carbon-based particles shows up from industrial processes, including coal-fired steel making in the area. Toronto's known for some level of steel making, so they could see carbon processes growing up, carbon-based particles, as well as plutonium from nuclear testing, a change in nitrogen isotopes from agricultural use of fertilizers, and the chemical fallout from acid rain is also shown up in here as well, too. So it's very demonstrative of what impacts we've had in many different ways, because it's kind of secluded, but it's close to things that would impact on it, and the sedimentation is very regular and dependable in that area. So there's a small lake, and the interesting thing is that they usually give these names based upon, for these periods, based upon the area that something was found. So if you hear about the Ediacaran period, which is just before the Cambrian time and Precambrian age, that was the Ediacaran desert area in Australia. That was the first evidence of that age was there. So they give it the name of that kind of place. So this could be called the Crawfordian period or something like that for Lake Crawford. They put in, like I said, what they call a golden spike, but I believe it's really brass. And I think they have a picture of that. This is an earlier one, pretty good size. And that's actually in the Australian desert now. That one in 2004, they planted that to show that that is demonstrative of this change of the beginning of clusters of colonies of small bacteria in the Ediacaran area in Australia. It demarks a change from the Precambrian eon to the Cambrian, 541 million years ago. By scientific custom, the new age, the new human age, the Anthropocene, may actually be called the Crawfordian after a small lake near Toronto. So that's pretty much, I think next slide, showing that's Crawford Lake. And then click through it a few times and things come up, yeah. So I thought I'd have some time for some questions or comments or thoughts about this age and what's going on with it. Jim, right here in front of you.
Yeah, I just, thanks, Mike, that was terrific. But really, at our time, our overriding issue is global warming for the Anthropocene.
Mm-hmm.
What are your predictions?
Predictions about the global warming, what we're going to Well, I think we're facing challenges about it, right? In terms of global warming, it's seems like politically it's more of a problem than a scientific problem. I think there's things that people have known what to do, but there's a lot of pushback by vested
I
interests.
keep running into the problem of people assuming that somehow or other science is going to miraculously come up with the answer and it's going to instantly go away. And you say to them, no, 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 no. This is a large planet. You may have heard of it. It's called Earth. That it's very much like a buffer solution of a chemistry. Once you pass a certain point, it just flows, and you can't stop it. It's gone, and you have to wait for the next plateau and hope that you can stop it at that plateau. But we're now at the point where there aren't any more plateaus for a long time. We're in for a big downhill, and that is a great cause of concern.
And it is interesting because you get to 97% of climate scientists that basically are saying those kind of things, and then there's people that want to call themselves skeptics that want to say that, you know, things will go on, people will find ways of doing things, but there's a lot of signs of some big trouble. I think that some of the large ice shelves in Antarctica, like you were alluding to earlier, are in deep structural threat right now. And if they go, there could be an increase in seawater rise of, they're talking about I've heard 7 feet, something like that, of just this one
And then
Thwaite
think about what
Glacier.
happens when Antarctica goes. It's going to be 30 to 50 meters, 100 feet. New York will disappear. Washington will disappear. All the big cities are on the coastline are gone. They're all underwater. Florida becomes a tiny little finger sticking out from the North American continent.
Well, it
and
can't
we're
all be
going to
bad.
facing this, and remember, this is where our populations are. Look at the population of the United States. It's on the west coast, it's on the east coast, it's on the south coast. What do we do when those coasts aren't there anymore? They're underwater.
Yeah, I mean, there's an amazing, when you think of, we're living on an Earth that has changed in the time that it's been here, in 4.5 billion years. It's changed in fascinating ways. Most of them we can look back at with some level of scientific hindsight and say, oh, that was interesting, look what happened there and there. But we're facing the potential of some significant increases in water level, changes in water level, changes in crop. You know, to me, I think I keep looking at small signs. There used to be, it was 20 years ago, the bark beetle had never, up in Canada, had never infested an area more than an acre in size. Now it's taking out whole swaths of land and killing enormous areas in there. That because of global warming, it's got a double life cycle now. It has offspring that also have offspring the same summer, and so they're having twice the life cycle. Many more of them are overwintering. They're making it through the tough winters that used to kill them off. So it used to be just a few bark beetles would make it through a tough winter up north, and then they'd go and live their life cycle and die off again for the most part in the time. But now the bark beetles are surviving, they're thriving, they're reproducing. It's a great time for a bark beetle. They're saying global warming, great stuff, you know. But to us, we're seeing the immense amounts of changes to the forests of Canada because of this, you know, and it goes on with all sorts of things. A great book, besides this, The Human Age, I would recommend is Elizabeth Colbert has written a book called The Sixth Extinction. And that talks about, we all recognize, scientists recognize 5 different extinctions. We talked about one at the end of the time when the dinosaurs came and were knocked off the planet. But she talks about the 6th extinction, which is an immense amount of different animals. Insects are really dying off to a great extent now. Used to be you'd drive across the country, most of us remember it, your car would be filled with bugs on the windshield and everything. There's much less of that going on nowadays. And that has an effect on songbirds, which has an effect on hawks, which has, it has a knock-on effect that goes on for all these different creatures. But significant, Elizabeth Colbert wrote The Sixth Extinction. She travels to different areas that are giving evidence of extinction activity and writes about what's going on there. One example is she goes to South America, and on these hillsides, there have been clusters of animals, and they've been able to see animals and plants. As you go up these fairly steep hillsides, you see different biozones, right? Different plants, different ecologies going on in there, these microzones of life. And basically, there's been some scientists that have roped off or isolated some of these areas, and they're studying them. And all these plants are moving up the sides of the hillsides, up towards the top. And some of them can't move anymore, right? The ones that are at the top, it's changed enough that they're becoming extinct, and the other ones are moving, and it's this ecological disaster going on of alien invasive species that were just used to live 50 meters down the hillside. Now they're up and invading into these other zones. So that's one. She goes to coral reefs off of Australia and discusses what's happening there. And so it's a very excellent book to go into details on that. Jim?
Yeah, Mike, if we could discuss more of this political problem, because I agree with you. It really is a political problem of getting more, management of global warming, and that includes international, United Nations, and so forth like that. I mean, really, the recent democratic program for global warming really has kind of turned the curve for us in this country, and I think that's the most important thing we can discuss about this issue at this time. What do you think?
In terms of what's the most important issue to discuss? Well, I mean, we're here for some levels of science, and then that can impact us politically. But I want to talk about the science of things, and then we can move into action based on all that too. But I did want to kind of emphasize that there are positives of looking at a climate a change of the what we've done as humans. I mean, maybe we tend to beat ourselves up too much about things, and we ought to look at the fact that we have impacted the world in ways that are to at least our benefit. And you can't, it's a bad world where you just say everything's terrible, terrible, terrible. So I'm trying to balance that a bit.
I think we're at a point where we can accept that maybe we are in the Anthropocene full-heartedly, just because of all the impacts that have happened. I think I heard a while ago David Attenborough talk about this issue, about defining what ages are. How long does an age have to happen? Does it even need a time span if it needs to be classified as the age that it's in? And I think that doesn't necessarily have to matter at all. I think maybe just the impacts and the changes and everything that goes on at once can happen in a short period of time. And whether it's known as the Anthropocene or the sixth mass extinction really depends on what we do with it, with that information, and how we go about it in the future. What to do about that is a more complicated question, I think, but as far as the big question that's up there on the board and everything like that, I think we can accept that we are in the Anthropocene at least, or at least that started.
Yeah, I mean, if you decide to give a term to something, Diane, and Beck.
You mentioned it was a political problem, right, more than science, and Richard Feynman chastised science for being too timid. We should go out, not we, but the scientists should go out screaming from the rooftops that we're going to kill ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and there's powers that be. I don't think I'm saying anything that's not obvious, but there's powers that be that want us to stay calm and quiet and accept what happens too. And you have to decide what's right for you as a person too. Rebecca?
Rachel.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. So I'm not usually very good at formulating my thoughts into words, so bear with me. But I just want to thank you for sharing this topic. I found it really interesting and came at a really important time for me. I was watching Planet Earth last night, and I was just sobbing. I was like just sobbing, so emotional, just seeing these animals choking on plastic and just all the atrocities that humans have caused. And so all morning, I felt really awful, and it's this sense of like this otherness, like humans aren't part of nature. Humans are this completely, disconnected entity. Like we're not even part of the rest of nature. And your presentation reminded me that we are. And it's like a strange phenomenon because we're self-aware, but we are still animals too. So we're like just living our lives and reproducing and just, dumping our garbage all over the earth because that's what we do as living things. And so on one hand, it's like, it's almost inevitable, but the fact that we do have that intelligence and self-awareness, like I don't think that means we should be complacent or just say like, well, that's just what we do as mammals, and that's what we do. I don't think that's an excuse. So it's hard to, I guess, come to terms with like our aliveness, if that makes sense, and also our obligation to do something about it because we are aware. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
It's my stream of consciousness. Thank you.
No, I think it's wonderful. I think I have that challenge with the balance of how do you feel about things. Do you want to, you don't want to beat up humankind for the fact that we've taken advantage of our brains and our intellect and our, and our capacity, our opposable thumbs. We've done things that are wonderful, beautiful things. We've understood the world. No other creature, like you said, is self-aware, can look at these things and can wonder about things and wonder about what's on Diane's T-shirt, and or Joanne's T-shirt, I mean. And so, I think we probably have to go from optimism to pessimism to finding some way to challenge ourselves to understand it as best we can. And I always feel like there's certain diabolical creatures that want to make us all just freeze into inaction, about things. And I'm not comfortable doing that either. So, it's time to sharpen up the pitchfork, some people say, and it's time to just study more and learn more, and it's not best to just learn and watch ourselves go down, but it's nice to be with people that are concerned and interactive. I know my daughters question whether they wanted to have children. Do you bring children into this world? Because what a world, and it's refreshing to me. I think to me, now that one has a baby and another on the way, to me it's a little bit of a sign of optimism that we can do something and we need to do something, and the earth is going to go on, and we need good people in it, so I'm glad my daughters are bringing some more good people into it, too.
It's easy to get pessimistic and to feel like hopeless at times. And so I'm going to throw in a little plug for Citizens Climate Lobby, which I've done some presentations on. So Citizens Climate Lobby is an organization that gives people power to do things politically to try and create a livable world. So if you're interested or don't know about it, I recommend it. Thanks.
Absolutely, great organization.
What's that?
Great organization.
Great, yeah.
I'm
Mark's
reminded
done a
of
lot
Carl
with it.
Sagan, way back now. Carl's been dead for a long time, but he's the one that brought up one of those ideas that our problem is not really the science; it's really the scientific press. We do not tell people the facts. We try to sugarcoat it. We try to take something which is a 5 or 10 minute discussion and put it into a 2-second headline. And so the public looks upon science as almost being miracle workers, and that we know everything and we do everything instantaneously, not realizing that we're just standard humans. We walk around on 2 legs like everybody else, and that it takes a whole lot of us to get anything done at all, and a lot of money. And the popular press does not express this at all. People look at global warming, people look at viruses, people look at vaccines through this lens that I simply do not understand, and I have to put this down as much to the popular press as anyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think even when we got into the cures, the vaccines for for COVID, you know, all of a sudden it was, oh, well, we're going to work really hard on this because it's important, and then the magic will come off and everything will change. And no, that's not how it worked. And it had been based on years and years of study of retroviruses and different things.
I think we're in a little bit of a bubble here. Do you think you could have this conversation in Florida?
They are starting to have conversations about global warming, and they're seeing there's a question in back, Joanne, to the in Florida, they're having every full moon, they're having flooding in the streets of Miami that they didn't have before. So I mean, I think that people wait until their ankles are wet, I guess, until they get into an issue, right? Which is sad.
I think part of, to add on to her comment earlier with science in the press, I think part of the problem is the fact that studies, like the actual scientific journal studies, are locked behind a paywall while misinformation is free. And so that kind of causes that problem. And to add on to your question about how do you communicate this with people on the other end, it's patience. It's really the only way to do that, because like I come from a family where pretty much nobody believed in climate change, like I want to say 5 years ago, but with constant kind of prodding and patience and everything, that slowly started to change. So I think that's really the only way you can do something like that, is just through patience and not abandoning those
Right,
people.
and you start looking at, you kind of wonder, I mean, I think there are things that need to be done. There's a time frame of things that need to be done. But it is kind of, when you think of this 13 billion years and 4 billion years of life on the planet, and then people are saying, if we don't do something about climate change in this presidential election season or something like that, the whole world's going to go to hell, you know. And so there's all sorts of, and that may be true even. But on the other hand, it's hard to recognize, if you're going to say that global climate change has to be fixed in the next 6 months or something like that, it's hard to reconcile that with a geologic view of life too. And both may be true. I mean, you should have a geological view of life, and that's not easy. Our minds, our primate minds aren't meant to evaluate what 13 billion years really means, or 4 billion years. Or 1,000 years, it's hard to imagine, you know, what that is. But 6 months or 5 minutes we can handle, you know. That tiger's right on me. He's about ready to have me for lunch. Maybe last question. You have one last question, and then I think we ought to close it off. We can hang around and talk some more as well, too.
I mean, on the topic of geological time, yeah, I think that's a little bit of a false comparison, because from a geological view, climate change doesn't matter. The planet will be fine.
Right.
We could raise 5 degrees, 10 degrees, cook everything. The planet will be fine. Geology will continue unabated. I'd even guess life will probably exist in some form unabated. It's about us.
Right.
I don't want to go through that transition. The rocks will be fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's true. And you know, the bark beetles and cockroaches and different species may do very well in this, and certain do. But it's a tough life to have such a change occur in such a rapid amount of time. It's not a normal procedure, which is, you know,
We have a
why it's
wonderful
worthy of discussion.
laboratory out there in Chernobyl where humans don't exist any longer. And life it's fecund.
Burgeoning,
There's
yeah.
all these critters, and they're running around. They're having a really good time doing critter things, and everything is coming back because there ain't no people there.
Right, yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming. If you want to get on the mailing list, come on up and sign your name here, please. Thanks for the time.